Now, with video memories, it's all about going back. Today, we look at Down the Mine and Other Stories, the second Thomas and Friends video I ever owned. We know at this point that my first ever Thomas and Friends video release was Troublesome Trucks and Other Stories. But this is not my original copy of Troublesome Trucks. This is a copy I purchased on eBay last year. So currently, this is my oldest Thomas and Friends video I own, and it's probably my second favourite behind Chases, Races and Runaways. When it comes to going back, you can't go back much more than this. Oh, whatever. So let's look at it. Now, before we begin, if you collected British Thomas and Friends videos back in the 90s, there was one advert that everyone saw.
Welcome to the world of children's videos. It's video collection's special favourites for our young audience, beginning with the adventures of Thomas the Tank Engine and friends.
Hurry up, Thomas!
Life on the island of Sodor can be very busy, but the engines enjoy their work on the railway. Sometimes the adventures Thomas has with his friends land them in trouble.
Boxes and bags burst everywhere. Oh! Groaned Percy.
Now, I've covered this several times. I credit it to Trust Thomas most of the time, but time for me to contradict myself once again. This video, and this advert in particular, was my first real-time hearing that guy who appeared in the bill. The guy who goes by the name of Michael.
Billy, you were on the bar last night. Tell these officers everything they need to know.
No, not him. The one I always make jokes about. The one people actually like. The other Michael. Actually, can I avoid the joke if I only use his first name and not his surname? Do I have to say both of them bite the bullet, or is there some sort of loophole where I can get away with just saying his full name and avoid cliche gags? I don't know. I don't fucking know! Oh wait, the joke hasn't been made yet. Question answered. Moving on. So, stupid jokes aside, this was my genuine first time hearing Michael. Of course, being an extreme simpleton of 3 years, I barely noticed the difference between him and Ringo. Of course it's easy for adults to discern who's who, but back then, they were all the same. Yeah, I've mentioned this several times before. It's relevant to the video, so shut up! You don't like it? There's the door there. You're staying? Super! If we're being super technical, Trust Thomas was the first full video I watched featuring you-know-who, Thomas and Stepney was the first one I owned with him, and The Fogman was the video that gave me confirmation that there was more to it than Ringo. I'll cover that video at some point in this lifetime. Don't get your hopes up, I am planned for the next 6 months. Jesus, I went off topic here. I love telling stories and rehashing stupid jokes if it isn't clear at this point. That's video memories in a nutshell when you think about it. Where were we? So the ad also covers Rosie and Jim, which I barely watched, Tots TV, which I watched once or twice, and the 1983 film Wind in the Willows, which I think I saw once. It's an incredibly vague memory, but I think I've seen it once and I don't remember being super won over.
Found guilty on the clearest evidence. 19 years! 19 years? And another year for being green!
Racist bitch.
20 years!
Yeah, I got nothing. And now the VCI logo plays. Wait, that's not VCI. Truth be told, I haven't watched this video in years, and I could have sworn this was VCI. It turns out a fair few of my videos have this logo, and it just slipped my mind. And I've heard stories about this logo freaking the everlasting doo-doo out of many innocent kids. I share their pain. I was there. I don't know if it's the big ominous fuck you bang at the beginning, or the rather trippy and severely outdated animated satellite slash TV slash whatever that wobbles everywhere before transitioning into a large red rectangle, but it traumatized us. VCI for life over here. And here we go. If I have to say one thing, I'm impressed at how well the video has aged. It's over 20 years old and it's surprisingly hiss-free. Okay, that's weird. The intro is slightly butchered. Okay, it seems the video hasn't aged that well, and the audio just fades out. Okay, what the fuck? For some reason, it seems like every copy of Down the Mine starts like this, a butchered intro and 2 rounds of name boards. Why it's like this, I have no idea. I can only assume they wanted to combine everything from Troublesome Trucks onwards into one video, but upon realising they'd be lucky to cram that much footage onto one videotape and still maintain super good visual quality... Actually, strike that, now I have no clue whatsoever. For the main feature, this video hosts 9 episodes narrated by Ringo Starr, covering the last third of Season 1 from Cole to Thomas's Christmas Party. I've mentioned before that Seasons 1 and 5 are my favourite classic Thomas and Friends seasons, and this video was no doubt a massive influence on why Season 1 was my favourite. Seasons 2, 3 and 4 have their places out there, but this video was one of my absolute best. It may just be 9 episodes, but I came to appreciate so much from it. Troublesome Trucks introduced me to Thomas and Friends, but Down the Mine made me a fan of the series and what it had to properly offer. Now, for my favourite episode, I remember being a fan of Whistles and Sneezes, purely for the reason that a train actually goes over Gordon's Hill in the opposite direction for once. I swear this is true. You look at Season 1, the engine always goes under the bridge, up the hill by going left, down the other side and through Marin Station. In Whistles and Sneezes, as a kid, I was just happy to see Gordon go the other way for once. And speaking of Gordon's Hill, another episode I could praise is Dirty Objects, that episode where James has an accident with some rather unruly freight cars. Now, a few British Thomas fans may dislike me using the American term more often than the British term, but here's the problem. I just don't care. As for least favourite, I'm going to point to Toby and the Stout Gentleman, purely because the story about his tramline being closed is a bit of a downer. I got nothing on this one. It's not Toby and the Flood bad, it's just my least favourite in the video, that's basically it. I'm not sure of what else to say about Down the Mine really. It is a textbook example of childhood nostalgia for me. This helped make Thomas my entire life. So enough of that. Too much nostalgia can make a guy giddy. Next time, we return to Fife, Disney style. Let's talk once more about The Lion King. I've already covered the 1994 movie. It's still a phenomenal experience, but there is a lot more to the series. A lot more that I find incredibly hard to dislike. There's the sequel, Lion King 2, which people often regard as one of Disney's best sequels. I will also go on record to say that I actually think it's superior to the original movie in a few places, and holds up really well, even to this day. There's Lion King 3, or Lion King 1.5, the story that retells the original movie from Timon and Pumbaa's perspective. It's okay, nothing too horrible. There's a few plot holes here and there, but I'm still happy to watch. Then there's The Lion Guard, the recent TV series running on Disney Junior that serves as a midquel between movies 1 and 2. It's very kid friendly and Simba's voice sucks, but the show has heart, the art style looks great and the kids will love it. Then there's the spin-offs, things not relating to the movies. The Lion King animated storybook, classic game that tells the story of the first movie through a CD-ROM. The Lion King Activity Centre, many harmless minigames of all sorts featuring many locations across the Pride Lands. Fun as a kid, outdated and cringeworthy as an adult. Uh-oh! And of course, there's Timon and Pumbaa's Jungle Games, probably the most iconic game here, and one of my favourite video games of all time. This game is great. This one defined my early gaming childhood and would honestly make my top 5 video games list, along with Super Smash Bros. Melee, Pokemon Emerald, Grand Theft Auto 5 and Sonic Generations. It may not hold up super well these days, it was for Windows 95 after all, but this was my fucking youth, and I still have fond memories of this game. There was also a Timon and Pumbaa TV series that ran from 1995 to 1999. Compared with The Lion Guard, this one was very silly and over the top. I once recorded 3 hours worth of this TV series onto a recordable video. I'm not uploading this to YouTube, not if I want to keep my channel alive. But I can show off one thing, Around the World with Timon and Pumbaa, the 1996 home video release containing 6 episodes and 1 music video from the TV series.
Coming soon from Disney Videos.
And here we have a promo for 101 Dalmatians. It's a great movie, don't get me wrong, even the live action ones aren't terrible. But the weird thing about this one is that I constantly look at my DVD of the movie and I wonder, what do I enjoy so much about this? And then of course I pop it in and suddenly I'm having a good laugh. I wouldn't say it cracks my top 10, but it's still a very enjoyable hit. It's basically Fat Dog Mendoza with some definitive answers, really. Now we have a promo for Gargoyles the movie. What on earth is this? I say this because I've seen the trailer a gazillion times, but I've never actually watched it. Honestly, it feels too dark to be Disney related. I hold a similar feeling towards Men in Black. I'm sure it's an enjoyable TV series, but it's not what I look for when it comes to Disney. Up next we have a promo for Pocahontas. As far as I know, with my collection, this is my third Pocahontas promo, and as far as I'm concerned, this is the best promo. I used to actually own Pocahontas, but I put it down to this promo as the reason why I decided to give it another go. Pocahontas is a really good movie. Lion King on video, of course, it's a Timon and Pumbaa release from 1996. Of course they'd want to promote the original movie. I mean, Christ, it's on the inside of the box after all. Silly me, I was expecting otherwise.
Through the years, Walt Disney Classics have brought your family the laughter, the thrilling adventures, the spirited fun, and that indescribable feeling that makes Disney Classics truly special.
Wait, they're running this one now? Back in episode 3, I questioned why an ad like this would run at the end of a video, when a child's attention span is fading. Okay, they're making progress, they've moved it up. I mean, it's not going to make me care about Alice in Wonderland or Mary Poppins more than I already do, but at least they have a chance to win the kids over this time. And of course they're going to promote the animated storybook. Why the fuck not at this point? Hey, I praised it a few minutes ago, so I can't really complain. We're not going to see Space Mountain next, are we? Are we? Nope, we're good. And thus begins Around the World with Timon and Pumbaa. The duo are out having a lovely wander in sunny Africa. Oops, strike that, it's raining. And Pumbaa gets struck by lightning. Timon drags him into a cave and learns that his friend has developed amnesia from the lightning bolt. He dedicates their time in the cave to rebuilding Pumbaa's memory through flashbacks. In essence, 6 episodes from the TV series: Bora Bora, Yukon Con, Saskatchewan Catch, Brazil Nuts, Truth or Zaire, Never Everglades, and the music video Stand By Me. Plus original scenes created specifically for this home video release, complete with 2-second cameos of some familiar Lion King characters. Oh, so Scar isn't actually dead. After the final story involving an alligator, Pumbaa is able to regain his memory. Timon begins to celebrate and he gets struck by lightning, himself gaining amnesia. Oh, for the love of God. Pumbaa tells us the only way to restore Timon's memory is by rewinding the video. Super! And that's Around the World with Timon and Pumbaa. It's really hard to hate something relating to The Lion King, and this one is no exception. Timon and Pumbaa isn't my favourite Disney TV show, but it's still really enjoyable, and I have to praise this video for introducing me to the series. This was long before Toon Disney and Dig It came around, so I had no idea this show existed. Of course, once it appeared on Dig It, I was set for the weekend. I've praised Dig It already before, so you know my feelings there. Oh, if only I had something Dig It related for Recordable Fridays. That's not me actually setting up a surprise release on YouTube, I actually don't have anything. And of course there's promos at the end. Why wouldn't it be? I said what I had to say in the Lion King episode. If you want kids to buy videos, don't put promos at the end, especially after someone in the video tells them to rewind. I could say I owned one of these Winnie the Pooh videos, but that's about it. Oh yeah, I remember hating those live action sing-along Mickey videos. I never owned any, I just saw the trailer and I knew I didn't want to see it. I got nothing, it's the end. I will say, I did find it a bit ominous to see it just end on a static image of the Walt Disney Videos logo with just plain text. It felt really wrong to me. It takes me back to my grandparents' house actually. To this day, I actually remember watching and enjoying this very release at their house back in 2003. Nearly every weekend, my mother and I made a regular trip to Glenrothes to visit the grandparents. I'm less than 10 years old, I had no say in this. I was unable to stay home and watch Down the Mine or Troublesome Trucks or Singing Kettle World Tour. Top class entertainment after all. Fine, I'll go, but I'm not going to stick with the adults talking about God knows what in the living room. Fuck that. Adults are boring. I'll be in the conservatory. Right, what could I watch? Aristocats? Nah, I have that at home. Jungle Book? It's okay every now and then. Children's cartoon favourites? No. Care Bears, Popples and Sylvanian Families are no favourites of mine. Sesame Street, Sing Yourself Silly? Funtime favourites? Oh wait, I don't get that one for another few years. Ignore that one. Children's preschool compilation? I watched Trust Thomas and that was it. It was just Thomas with Ringo Starr. No more, no less. That covers me for 5 minutes. God, I need to bring new videos over here. Postman Pat's big video. Now we're talking. So if it isn't clear at this point, Postman Pat was always my favourite video from Fife. Every time I visited and was left to my own devices, this was always first on the watch list. That being said, I am not the biggest fan of Postman Pat. I could not tell you about every character in Greendale, or any information about the locations or plots, or any special details about Jess or Pat's family, or about every single post van Pat's ever driven. But I did grow to enjoy the series because of this video. I didn't buy extra videos, but for a good few years I did keep an eye out and watch whenever the series came on TV. Hell, when the movie came out a few years ago, I decided to give it a go to satisfy the child in me. I'll just say that it was more entertaining than it had any right to be. But let's look at Big Video. This video was initially released in 1988 with 4 episodes from early season 1. Postman Pat's Rainy Day, Pat's Tractor Express, Pat's Birthday, and Pat Takes a Message. I have the 1992 re-release, but the content is virtually the same. Only 4 episodes long, but it kills an hour of time, and that is dearly appreciated for any child. While the boring adults are talking in another room, we need something to amuse our primitive brains. I will say one thing, this video is a unique specimen. My youthful opinion on this is virtually identical to my adult opinion. I visit Fife from 1996 to 2007, usually for up to 2 days. I watch this at least once per day. Rainy Day and Pat's Birthday were the best episodes. I was indifferent to Tractor Express, and I was freaked the fuck out by the sound of the van's engine noise and Pat Takes a Message. Over a decade later, I bought the video again on eBay. And totally not the 1988 version, because only an idiot would buy the wrong version of something and only recognise the problem after delivery and after watching the opening promos. As I was saying, I bought the same video on eBay last year, and what do you know, my opinion hasn't changed. Rainy Day and Birthday entertained me, Tractor Express was meh, and Pat Takes a Message gave me a heart attack. Translation, I'm still a child at heart. So I rank this one rather high for the 18 years I spent at my grandparents' house. New videos were later added to the collection over the years, but Pat remained high. Now let's get the fuck out of Fife. Time to go home and look at something from this century. People have often said Season 5 of Thomas and Friends was the last good season of content until Seasons 17 and 18. And while I will admit Season 17 was the best season in years, I think the horrific quality after Season 5 is a little bit exaggerated. I will agree that there was a slight dip in quality from Season 8 onwards, and Season 7 was a bit hit and miss. But when it comes to Season 6, I will always defend that block of 26. I still have a belief that that season was genuinely good. Of course, being the collector that I was, I had every home video release. All 3 of them. Let's have a look at one of them, The Chocolate Crunch, released in March 2003 and featuring 8 episodes from this rather good season. I really will defend this one. It won't beat Seasons 1 and 5. Overall, I'd say it was better than Seasons 3 and 4. As for Season 2, I rank it as being better when it comes to narration, but worse in terms of plot. Overall, the season was hit and miss, but there were some genuinely good episodes there, and the narration is great. So let's give it a go. VCI logo, a real classic. Hit Entertainment logo, not so much. Sorry boys, VCI wins in the logo department every time. Unless we're talking about Cartoon Network, childhood beats early 21st century every time. I must say, it feels weird to see these promos for closed captioning on something non-Disney related. I don't know what it is, but 9 times out of 10 if I see this ad for the European Captioning Institute, I just naturally assume Disney. But whatever. And here we go! New opening as well, used only for Season 6. A strange and unnecessary change, but an interesting one nonetheless. Hey, wait a minute! Who's this Michelangelo's fella? When did he start narrating, and what happened to Ringo?
Here we go.
We finally reached that point. The point where it hit me. I grew up watching Season 1 and a bit of Season 2. It said quite clearly, narrated by Ringo Starr. I had nothing from Season 3, I had one release from Season 4, and it said... Oh, fuck off, I didn't notice. Season 5 didn't say anything about the narrator, and now suddenly we have this Michelangelo's guy. At this point, I'd like to take note that Michael himself has been in contact and has stated his dislike for the classic joke I use whenever I mention him. He'd like me to discontinue that joke in his words.
As from fucking now.
Well, sure, Mike, I won't repeat the joke. I'll never use it again.
His name's Nigel.
I'm just kidding, that joke's going nowhere. I've never talked to Mike, and I'm just saying all this to make a joke from a 33-year-old movie. I like to think I'm pretty cliche. How cliche can I be? The best song from the Give More Love album is Back Off Boogaloo.
Back off Boogaloo, I say, back off Boogaloo, come on, back off Boogaloo.
Enough said. So anyway, 8 episodes from Season 6. Percy's Chocolate Crunch, Jack Jumps In, The World's Strongest Engine, Middle Engine, Buffer Bother, Thomas the Jet Engine, Duncan, and finally Faulty Whistles. One thing I can't help but notice about the video is that the title is The Chocolate Crunch rather than Percy's Chocolate Crunch. Granted, there was only one Chocolate Crunch, but that never stopped them before. Look at Thomas's Christmas party. There's also the American release, Percy's Chocolate Crunch, released a month prior to this one. That kept the title. There's no complaints really, it's still a great release. Well, the UK one is anyway. The American dub is one thing I will not defend from Season 6.
Why the rush, Gordon? Asked Thomas. If I must pull freight cars, then I'll show Salty how an express engine pulls freight cars, Gordon huffed.
The American dub of Season 6 sucks and I don't care who knows it. Now as for the best episode, that's a hard one. Really, it comes down to 3. Chocolate Crunch, Thomas the Jet Engine, and The World's Strongest Engine. I want to peg World's Strongest as the best episode. That one gave me a good chuckle. Originally, I just thought Diesel was weak sauce due to his inability to shift those trucks. It actually took me a couple of watches to hear a certain bit of dialogue.
Diesel didn't know the shunters had set the brakes on the trucks. The troublesome trucks knew, but encouraged Diesel to push anyway.
As for the worst episodes, I'd say it's a mix between Duncan and Faulty Whistles. I was never huge on those two, as much as I love Mike's voice for Duncan.
I'll show that smelly Diesel and those lazy steamers.
So that's the Chocolate Crunch. I'm not sure if it's the best Season 6 release, but it does have a few winners in there. When it features You-Know-Who, Season 6 will never get old. No, not him. He's a great actor, but a boring narrator. Right, that's episode 24 covered. Number 25 is next. I want to do something big to fit the number. What could I do?
Alec Baldwin.
Got to find more gold dust.
Peter Fonda.
This is your shining time to...
And Mara Wilson.
You're a really useful engine, Thomas.
Star of Matilda.
Now that's what I call a perfect landing.
In Thomas and the Magic Railroad.
I'll save a seat for you.
The day I saw that trailer in 2000 is the day I became giddy like a schoolgirl. They were making a Thomas the Tank Engine movie. This was the greatest thing that could ever happen, ever. Now, I'm not sure if I saw Magic Railroad in theatres or not. What I am sure of is the fact that the movie pissed off my mother. It wasn't enough that she was sick of the TV series after 7 years, but the movie came out on her birthday, you see. If I didn't see it in theatres, my first time would have been with this video released in October 2000. The adults were no doubt very vocal on how awful this movie is, but they're adults, what do they know? And now, over 17 years later, it's time to discuss the most infamous production in the history of Thomas & Friends. As per the usual, this is not a hardcore review of the movie, it's just my views and experiences with it over the past 17 or so years. Let's start at the beginning, as usual. Icon! It's an eye, it's just an eye. Now we have an ad for Tomika World. It's a Thomas movie, sell as many toys as possible. I used to collect Tomika, but I never had a set as big as this. Now we have a promo for The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. I've actually never seen the original Grinch. I've seen the Jim Carrey Grinch, but never this one. Surprise, surprise. Holy crap, it's the Thomas & Friends Big Loader. I actually had this. This was the kind of thing that warped any infant with an imagination. As long as it's Thomas and he's doing something functional, the kids are sure to be pleased. And now we have a trailer for a movie called The Miracle Maker. What the hell is The Miracle Maker? Oh boy, it's religious. Religion's bad for me. No. I cannot take 2 minutes to talk about our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ. No. Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, never seen it. Magic Stars, now we're talking, one of my personal favourites. And finally we have the Video Standards Corporation portion of the video. It features clips from Tiny Toon Adventures and Free Willy. Apparently the video is suitable for children. Super! Moving on. And now we can finally talk about the movie, specifically the history of the movie. What makes this movie so infamous? I like to think it relates to the plot. The plot is all over the place. Let's just say it involves Thomas and his friends, Alec Baldwin, a station on the Indian Valley Railroad, a missing freight car in a trippy dimension, a raging diesel with an unruly claw, a lonely old man and a collapsing viaduct. Yeah, that about sums it up. It's a very butchered, Americanized mess. But let's look back. In 1998, Britt Allcroft receives funding to make a feature-length Thomas & Friends feature. She writes and films everything, model and live-action footage. It's gonna be great. It's all fine until it comes to the test screening in 2000. The audiences are not impressed. They cannot release this to kids. So Britt has to return to the drawing board. They had Michael What's-His-Face voicing James and Percy. He has to go. So does Thomas's voice as well. These liver-puddling voices just suck. And that main bad guy, he's too terrifying for kids. He has to go too. Okay, let's talk about P.T. Boomer, the original antagonist, and to a fair number of people, the biggest missed opportunity for the movie. He was cut almost entirely from the movie after audiences found him to be too ominous for kids. In the finished product, he only appears in one scene, very, very briefly. When I did my Thomas & Friends retrospective, I questioned what the point was of him being cut when you compare him to Diesel 10. But after doing a bit of research, I can actually see why he was cut. He was labelled as a drifter who's out to destroy Lady 40 years after crashing her and revenge her lady's caretaker Burnett Stone, hooking up with the love of his life Tasha. It turns out that despite the two of them wanting the same outcome, Boomer doesn't even meet Diesel 10 until the climactic chase at the end. There's apparently a number of occasions in the original cut of the movie where he gets into potentially violent confrontations with Billy Two Feathers or Barnett regarding Lady. In one scene, having his motorbike filled with dynamite, he actually sets off an explosion at Muffle Mountain, possibly with said dynamite. Jesus, that's not the kind of thing you can include in this movie. It's a Thomas & Friends production. You risk traumatizing and potentially alienating the target audience by having these scenes. Diesel 10 can be spooky too, what with his demonic and unruly claw, but in this situation, he can pretty much be seen as the lesser of two evils. I call bullshit on the issue with the liver-puddling voices. They were no doubt perfectly fine and would have passed for British audiences, but I can see why they wanted Boomer cut. For a Thomas & Friends movie, he's a bit too dark and edgy. Nonetheless, Britt and the editors had a problem here. If they wanted this movie released, she was going to have to make some big changes. She had to cut Boomer from the movie and make some big edits to make Diesel 10 the big bad guy for the movie. And that meant making pretty big sacrifices to the plot. I suppose I should mention that there's currently a petition on change.org demanding the release of the original cut of the movie, complete with P.T. Boomer. Is it worth signing? I'm going to say no. Oh boy, this is going to go well. I'm not out to offend anyone here, but I am actually against this petition. Forget that it would cost a fortune to recut the movie and pay out royalties, and may also require approval from executives at Hit Entertainment and possibly Mattel. Personally, I think this movie was way too ambitious and was doomed from the beginning. It's not like any Thomas & Friends production before. It was trying to be way bigger than it needed to be. It places a great deal of emphasis on the humans rather than Thomas and Friends. All these stories about Shining Time Station and the love triangle between Tasha and P.T. Boomer and Burnett and the eventual vandalism of Lady. Even if P.T. Boomer wasn't really edgy, Brit would risk boredom with the target audience. For one thing, British fans won't have a clue about Shining Time Station. The TV series was never broadcast over here, so they'd have no idea about Mr. Conductor, Stacey Jones, Bill Two Feathers, or the Indian Valley Railroad. They'd have to spend at least 20 minutes to set up the entire station for British fans, not to mention time to set up Burnett, P.T. Boomer and Lily. I suspect more than half the movie would have gone to these humans, and Thomas and the other engines would have just been a sideline. The main plot revolves around restoring and bringing life to Lady after the accident with P.T. Boomer / Diesel, and Thomas is sort of just there until the end. Thomas plays virtually no role in the revival of Lady other than bumping a coal truck into the Magic Railroad. That's pretty much it. Burnett and Patch actually do more for her than Thomas does, and he's supposed to be the main character of this movie. Parents took their kid to this movie because Thomas is on the poster, and they automatically assume that the majority of the film focuses on number one himself. Suddenly they find themselves dealing with multiple human characters with feeble backstories. The kids don't care about these human characters, they just want to see Thomas and his friends. All these dramatic confrontations may have worked out in any other big budget movie about railroads, but the problem is, this is a Thomas and Friends movie. You cannot have complicated and convoluted plot lines in a Thomas movie. I say leave this doomed production in the past and let it stand as an example of how dangerous it can be to be excessively ambitious. What goes on in the human world with Lady and Burnett could have worked as its own movie, as could the events on Sodor with Diesel 10. They just don't work together. Put them together and you get a convoluted and potentially boring and alienating mess of a production. Now, with all that said, is it really one of the worst movies ever made and a disgrace to Thomas and Friends? I don't think so. I know it may sound contrived considering how I've treated the movie so far, but there's more to it. I used to like the movie. I'm willing to bet most kids did. It wasn't until I joined YouTube in 2006 that I learned of the fact that a number of Thomas and Friends fans really hate the movie. At this point, I sort of just jumped on the hate bandwagon. The majority says it sucks, so it must be true. Now, my girlfriend and I have been together for many years. We love each other dearly, but she's not a Thomas and Friends fan in the slightest, and I have no plans to make her into one, and I'm not aiming to ever feature her properly on this channel. Hell, I showed her Thomas and Gordon a few years back and it freaked the royal shit out of her.
Wake up, lazy bones, why don't you work hard like me?
These steam engines talk? What the fuck is this? So long story short, she was never brought up on the show and never really got into it. Back in 2014, I decided to pull out my DVD copy of the movie purely to show her what I thought was Mara Wilson's career low point. I didn't expect it to go well, I expected her to get bored halfway through. And actually, it was more entertaining than I ever remembered it being. And it had nothing to do with Thomas, surprise surprise. It was actually all down to Diesel 10. It may be a butchered movie, but his dialogue is great. And I'd say it saves the movie from being completely unwatchable.
Hello, Twinkle Toes. Remember me? Fat Hat won't have much use for you looking like that. Oh, I see you forgot to bring the sugar. How careless. Say hello to Pinchy.
So that's Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Despite me bashing it, calling it a butchered mess, and not supporting the petition for the director's cut, it's not the worst movie ever made. I can personally vouch for it that much. Just that much. But it's still a bad movie, no question about it. Since we've covered a bad movie, let's cover something really good next time.
Let's go for a little ride.
Muscle cars, half-naked girls, late-night street races, over-the-top action sequences, deep-voiced bald men, the regular reminder of the importance of family. Put those all together and you have the Fast and Furious franchise, the legendary movie series featuring Paul Walker and Vin Diesel. It's one of the most iconic franchises of all time and I absolutely love it to death. Now it's time to share my thoughts on the series. I've wanted to cover the series for a long time, and now feels like the perfect time. Be warned, if you haven't seen the series, there will be slight spoilers. It all began in 2015. Until that point, I only knew Paul Walker from the 2003 movie Timeline, and Vin Diesel from The Iron Giant and The Pacifier from 2005. I swear that movie is actually good. But if you ask anyone else about Paul or Vin, at least 80% of them will mention a Fast and Furious movie. I had no idea what these movies were about, only that they involved speedy muscle cars. I knew Paul Walker played a cop, but that was about it. Of course, I remember reading about Paul Walker's death in 2013. It's a shame, but I didn't really know him from anything other than Timeline, a very unpopular movie. And then of course, in 2015, I see a poster for Furious 7. I remember thinking, oh Jesus, a 7th movie? Obviously, I had no idea how financially successful the franchise was. $5 billion as of 2017. Fucking hell, these movies are popular. Eventually, my girlfriend bought Sky Digital, including the Sky Movie channels. One day in 2016, what comes on but The Fast and the Furious, the first movie in this franchise. You know what? Fuck it. It's now time for me to finally experience this thing. I need to know if it's good or not. The first movie introduced me to Brian O'Connor, a police officer and racing enthusiast sent undercover to infiltrate a gang of thieves led by Dominic Toretto. Eventually, Brian gets himself in too deep, at one point getting friendly with Dom's sister, Mia. After a gang member is injured in an attempted heist, Brian reveals his true identity in an attempt to secure priority medical assistance, pretty much losing the trust of Dominic. After attempting to arrest Dom and killing members of a crime family and rival racing crew, Brian rescues Dom from his overturned Dodge Charger and gives him the keys to his car, thus providing an escape route for Dom and effectively throwing away his police badge.
You know what you're doing?
I owe you a 10-second car.
Overall, it was a mixed experience. I considered the first movie to be better than Timeline, but I had a really bad opinion regarding Brian O'Connor. Granted, Dom was involved in serious illegal activity, but Brian attempting to arrest him left a really bad taste in my mouth. God forbid he actually does his job as a police officer. Even after he surrendered his keys to Dom, I was still not super fond of his character. That was 1 film down and 6 to go. Unfortunately, I was not in a super huge rush to watch the next movie, which I suspect had to do with the fact that only Brian returned for this movie. I mean, Christ, I could barely remember his name, or Dom's name, or Mia's name, or Letty's name, or anyone's name. It was at least a month later when I was able to talk myself into watching movie 2. This time, a rogue Brian is recruited by the FBI to investigate Carter Verone, a drug lord operating out of Miami. I remember my attention span being rather vague for the first half of the movie, but it was the ending that gave me a good laugh, when Brian and Roman walk away with some recovered drug money, intended to be used as evidence against Verone. Very nice, Brian, very nice. I feel like you're starting to grow on me here. I might just give the rest of the series a go. After a quick browse on Wikipedia, I learned about the other movies and that Dominic Toretto appeared in the third movie, Tokyo Drift. Within a week, I was able to find movie number 3, this one starring Lucas Black in Tokyo. Tokyo Drift takes place in Tokyo, who would have thunk? In the end, I rather liked it. It felt like the original movie with a hint of the Karate Kid. New kid in town, there's a popular fad going around, in this case drifting. The new guy gives it a go and fails. Some old stranger takes him under his wing and teaches him what he needs to know. In the end, the old guy, in this case a man named Han, dies in a car accident. The new kid, known as Sean Boswell, goes on to win the race by nailing the drifting technique. I like this one. I mean, granted, Lucas Black's accent is awful, but I thought the plot was decent. It was nice to see Dom pop up at the end. It's like it's their way of saying, Dom's back and a fourth movie is on the way. I was feeling rather intrigued at this point. Dom was just a gang leader in the first movie, and suddenly he was coming back with Paul Walker. Colour me interested. Another scan of Wikipedia told me I had actually watched the movies out of chronological order. I was supposed to have watched Tokyo Drift after Fast and Furious 6. Ah, shit. I'm willing to bet my interest in the fourth movie would not have been so high had I not known Dom and Brian were coming back. Nevertheless, I had to see number 4, Fast and Furious? That's the movie title? But the first movie was... and this one was... forget it. Fast and Furious reunites Brian and Dom as they search for the same man, drug lord Arturo Braga, for their own reasons. Dom because his girlfriend Letty was murdered by a henchman of Braga's, and Brian because, well, Braga's a drug lord and Brian's now FBI, and the FBI are usually very interested in drug lords. Inevitably, Brian crosses paths with Dom and Mia. Oh boy, this is not awkward in the slightest. Nah, I'm sure Mia doesn't hold a grudge about Brian lying to her in order to arrest her brother. And I'm sure Dom doesn't hold any bitter feelings. Oh, that doesn't look good. After a confrontation with Letty's killer goes sour, Brian and Dom are more or less forced to cooperate to gain access to Braga. As you'd expect, Brian and Mia work out their issues, and Brian and Dom regain their trust of each other. On the other hand, Brian is suffering from a familiar dilemma. He has a strong feeling of loyalty towards Dom and his crew, but at the same time he has a secure career with the FBI. It's made even worse when he's instructed to arrest and bring in not only Braga, but Dominic as well. Oh bother, I'm detecting a slight conflict of interest here. He's just worked all his shit out with Mia and Dom, and I may have to arrest him in the end as well. After Brian offers a deal to the FBI, the capture of Braga in exchange for Dom's freedom, the duo travel to Mexico and are able to apprehend Braga, after which they pursue Letty's killer. Brian crashes his car after taking fire, and Phoenix the killer prepares to kill him as well. Okay, that was awesome. This movie is really, really good.
Pussy.
As the police approach, a severely injured Brian tells Dom to flee. Dom decides he's through with running and sticks by Brian. I think it's safe to say these two trust each other again. Despite Brian's requests, Dom is sentenced to 25 years to life in prison without parole. Oh, for fuck's sake! As Dom is transported to prison by bus, a group of muscle cars approach, led by Brian and Mia. Oh my god, I so know what's going to happen here! This was the point where I was convinced. I need to see the rest of the movies. This is going great. If there's any part of the series that shows the importance of trust and family, it's the ending to movie 4. Brian makes a deal with the feds regarding Dom. They go back on their word. Brian turns in his badge, throws away another secure career, and solidifies himself as a member of Dom's crew. And oh my god, this is fucking great! By the time the credits began to roll, I was officially a fan of the Fast and Furious series. I had only seen 4 movies out of 7, but I was already preparing for the rest of them. I had no idea what lay ahead, but I was more than ready, and that last ending sealed the deal. Next day, I had Fast 5, continuing straight on from the last movie, with Brian and Mia freeing Dom from the prison bus. The 3 of them are officially wanted criminals, pursued by DSS agent Luke Hobbs, under the assumption that Brian and Dom killed a group of DEA agents in a heist involving seized cars. It was just a heist that went sour. Brian just had to make a call.
Shitty call, O'Connor. Shitty call.
Towards the end, Brian and Dom plot to steal $100 million in cash from Brazilian drug lord Hernan Reyes. The franchise seems to really love drug lords. The money is being held in a large safe in a police station filled with the most corrupt police force in Brazil. How on earth are they going to relieve Reyes of all that money? Simple, yet totally unexpected. Brian and Dom hook some cables from their muscle cars to the station wall and floor it. Out comes the safe full of drug money. Holy motherfucking shit, that is the greatest thing ever! I had only seen the movie once, and yet I knew Fast 5 was easily going to make my top 10 list for the best movies I have ever seen. It wasn't going to compete with Back to the Future, Groundhog Day or The Italian Job, but it was definitely up there. That final car chase through Rio with the safe full of cash was a guaranteed winner for me. Without even looking at the end of Fast 5, I went straight into FNF 6 and was left speechless when Hobbs visited Dom with surprising news. Letty is alive and is working for a mercenary by the name of Owen Shaw. Dom may have settled down with Elena from Fast 5, but he has to find out if it's true. Fast forward through the birth of Brian's son, a chase through the streets of London, the revelation about Letty, and the hijacking of a military convoy, and that's Fast and Furious 6. It's a good movie. Not as good as Fast 5, but I still enjoyed it. At the end of number 6, Han, a member of Dom's crew from movie 4 onward, relocates to Japan, setting up the events of Tokyo Drift. As seen in the third movie, Han dies on a traffic collision. The driver of the offending car is Deckard Shaw, out to avenge his brother Owen. And let me just say this, Deckard Shaw has pretty much the greatest character introduction of all time.
Dominic Toretto. You don't know me. You're about to.
This sets up Furious 7. I knew in advance that Jason Statham was in the movie, and this was all I needed to know. He was the bad guy. On the other hand, I had one big question about what lay ahead. Paul Walker died before the movie was finished. How on earth were they going to pull this off? Were they going to kill Brian? Were they going to retire the character? Let's have a look. So whilst Brian fights between being in Dom's crew and having a normal life with Mia and his son, Dom and the gang pursue Deckard Shaw across 2 continents to avenge Han. That's the moral of Furious 7 and the Fast and Furious franchise in a nutshell. You just don't fuck with a man's family. Overall, Furious 7 was a great movie, but there was one scene that really did it for me. Every FNF fan knows what scene I'm talking about. Brian's goodbye scene at the end. He decides to retire from the crew and become a stay-at-home father. It's probably the most fitting way he could have gone out. Even without Paul Walker to finish it, they absolutely nailed this movie, and the ending is no exception. Very rarely do I get emotional during a movie, but this one got to me. Fantastic ending to a fantastic movie. Second best film in the series as far as I'm concerned. That's all 7 movies down, and I love it. The film series is great. I need to get the DVDs of these immediately. I give it a month at absolute most before I finally bought these. As you'd expect, they went straight into the DVD player. Time to see how well they hold up. I actually developed a higher level of appreciation for the first 2 movies. Too Fast Too Furious was actually a fair bit better than I remember. Tokyo Drift was another story. I liked it when I first saw it. After watching every movie up to Fast 6, chronological order after all, it was time for Tokyo Drift. And it was the biggest drop in quality I had ever seen with a movie. It was one of the most boring movies I had ever watched. I was genuinely surprised at this. I enjoyed the movie the first time. The second time round, after watching every other movie, Jesus Christ on a stick, it was horrible. The plot was nowhere near as entertaining as it was the first time round. And Lucas Black's voice was even worse than I remembered. At first, I thought he was just putting on a fake accent for the role, but after watching the 2010 film Legion, also starring Tyrese Gibson, aka Roman, I was horrified to learn that was his actual voice. It's so fucking painful to the ears! As of this video, Tokyo Drift is the only Fast and Furious movie I actively dislike. I'll happily watch the other movies, just not this one. Fortunately, other than Han's death, it holds virtually no important plot points relating to the subsequent movies, and that gets covered in Fast and Furious 6 anyway, rendering this movie entirely worthless in my eyes. Finally, we make it to Fate of the Furious. When I saw the theatre ads for this, I was more than ready. But there was one thing that caught me off guard. Dominic Toretto goes rogue. Oh boy, where are they going to go with this? Nonetheless, I went to see it last summer and it was amazing. Between the action and the chemistry between Hobbs and Deckard Shaw, I currently rank it as the third best movie in the franchise. It was that amazing to me. I was determined to go into the movie spoiler free. One simple Google scan of Brian O'Connor told me that Dominic names his new son after Brian. Dom has a kid too? Holy crap, there's a lot going on. I knew he had a kid, I just had no idea the mother was Elena and not Letty. Still, at the end of the movie, it didn't stop me thinking, you're naming him Brian? Oh, Dom, you bald asshole. I do need to make something quite clear. The absence of Paul Walker is very, very noticeable. At one point, Roman actually mentions the possibility of bringing Brian back to the crew to figure out the reason behind Dom's apparent betrayal. Regardless, this movie knows exactly how to tribute Paul 4 years after his death, and it is beautiful. I bought the DVD of Fate in October, about 3 months after seeing it in theatres, and after watching it a second time, I remember exactly why I consider it the best movie of 2017. It still holds up incredibly well.
You're gonna shoot a baby? You sick bastard.
We'll end this topic with the future of the series. They plan to wrap the series up at the 10th movie, which means they'll no doubt pull off something massive in the final 2 movies, perhaps as a 2-parter finale. There's also the upcoming spin-off for Luke Hobbs, Dwayne Johnson's character, also starring Jason Statham as Deckard Shaw. After seeing how well these 2 characters worked in Fate of the Furious, this movie's also on the watch list when that comes out in 2019. Then there's the final 2 movies due to be released in April 2020 and 2021. There's talk about Jordana Brewster returning to the series as Mia, which leads me to think we'll be seeing Brian again. Paul Walker's brothers have spoken out and are up for bringing Brian back, even if it's just for a cameo. I'm a little bit mixed on this one. While I would like to see Brian return, I also think they gave him the perfect send-off in Furious 7. There's also the dilemma of how they'd accomplish this, and what they do with Brian. If he does make a return, a small part of me thinks the producers will kill the character off, leading Dom in a final pursuit across the globe to avenge his emotional brother. Only time will tell. Woohoo! 8 movies covered in this one video. Right, let's do something different next time. Something short. Whenever I've talked about Thomas and Friends in video memories, it's always from either a video or a DVD.
There is a third option.
Of course there's a third option! Let's talk about when Thomas and Friends aired on TV. Of course, there's a million channels across the television world where Thomas has aired, in multiple languages no doubt. So to keep it short and knowledgeable, I'm just going to cover the channels I've witnessed in my lifetime. So let's start at the beginning with ITV, the first channel to run Thomas and Friends dating back to 1984. I remember watching season 6 on Children's ITV or CITV when it first aired in 2002. I have no evidence to support this, but it's my series, so I don't need evidence. Speaking of no evidence, let's talk once more about Cartoon Network.
And now, back to Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends on Cartoon Network.
The series ran on this channel from 1995 to 2001, essentially being the premier source for seasons 4 and 5. Did I watch it here? I don't know, but knowing my extensive history with Cartoon Network, I would not be surprised in the absolute slightest if that were the case. Then there's Channel 5, specifically the morning block Milkshake.
The children will be excited.
They should be. We've got brand new Thomas and Friends. There's some old friends.
Hello, Thomas.
And some new ones.
That's right.
So make sure you jump on board. Brand new Thomas and Friends tomorrow on Milkshake.
This is where brand new episodes of Thomas and Friends have aired since season 10 ran in 2006. It continues to run new episodes of the CGI series to this very day. I remember very well seeing season 12 air on this channel in 2008. I was away on holiday when Thomas and the Billboard ran, and I doubt I was able to catch the regular episodes every morning. But I remember getting straight onto YouTube in the afternoon to check every episode out. I had learned that the Michaels were there to stay rather than Pierce Brosnan, and they were trying something new involving animation, so I was filled with particular enthusiasm for this one. And finally, we get to the channel I know best when it comes to Thomas and Friends.
Nick Jr. is proud to announce the arrival of a very special engine, Thomas the Tank Engine. Blow a whistle and wave a flag. It's your chance to drive with Thomas, Edward, Henry, Gordon, James and Percy.
Hurry up, please.
The engines are proud to run the line, come rain or shine.
Well done, boys. Keep it up.
It's a children's classic, inviting you to join the engines in their world of adventures. Join Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends on Nick Jr.
Just for me.
Here we go. Nick Jr. began airing Thomas in 1999, and if I wasn't watching the series on Cartoon Network, I sure as shit was tuning into Nick. I remember it well. Back in those days, Thomas and Friends ran 3 times a day, 8 AM, 12 PM and 4 PM, each time running the same set of episodes for 25 minutes. Of course, back in those days, I was more than content to watch the same stuff more than once, so I made a decision. Watch the episodes first at 8 AM before school, ignore the 12 PM airing, and record it all at the 4 PM airing when I get home in the afternoon. Great plan, foolproof. And it was this very video that I used to record everything. My spelling was atrocious when I was 6 years old. Let's see how well it holds up.
Scotland's big film premiere, Heat.
Oh yeah, great. It holds up great. It holds up as well as good old-fashioned TV static. Ain't it great? I managed to dig this up in 2017 to hopefully show off to YouTube. I ransacked my old bedroom, dug out a few videos, including this one, as well as this ancient as fuck VCR. No, seriously, this thing is almost as old as me. After discovering only my living room TV would function properly with the VCR, I popped this video in and discovered nothing but static. Either I taped over it at some point in the past 19 years, or this video has just aged like milk left out in the summer heat. I lean towards option A because if it has aged like milk, it's aged worse than Singing Kettle Pirates, the first video I ever owned in my entire life. You hear that? My VCR had a heart attack trying to run this video. This tape is from 1995 and it's aged terribly, and yet it still runs better than the Nick Jr. video. So at least I can talk about the recording process. The video began halfway through Percy Runs Away. I was super terrible at timing things. And I assure you, it'll get worse. It began with Percy Runs Away, and where it ends involves a certain amount of guesswork. The tape ran for 3 hours and 3 minutes, 183 minutes altogether. We need to assume I didn't miss a single episode. I was a massive fan after all. Next, we need to determine whether or not I recorded either the opening or the closing credits. I record only the episode and the tape runs out at Thomas, Percy and the Dragon. I record the episode and either the opening or the closing credits, we end at Time for Trouble. In the highly unlikely event of me recording the episode and both sets of credits, we end at the beginning of Woolly Bear. I guarantee that last one didn't happen, but hey, it probably helps to list every option. At the end of the day, it means sod all to me. The video's blank, and many years later, I tried to continue my collection of recorded content, beginning with none of the above.
Coasting down the hill, running easily with the wind whistling past. Suddenly, it was a god's warning whistle.
What did I tell you? Great timing. Of course, there are a few Nick Jr. blocks to talk about. First up, we have Noggin. This was a nightly 2-hour period where the popular classics were aired. This sounds vaguely familiar.
Cartoon!
Very similar, but nowhere near as good. Noggin ran from May 2004 until September 2005, and I'm pretty sure it only ran the first 7 seasons. Classics after all. I know I remember watching this one because I have the proof that shows it. It even appeared in Recordable Fridays. I was even able to record a few episodes onto DVD as well. Just look at that. Wait a minute. this is the wrong noggin. There was a second noggin, launched in 2009. It may have been a reboot of the Nick Jr. noggin, I don't know. It ran on a channel called TMF, The Music Factory. Why a channel relating to MTV would air Thomas and Friends, I have no idea. What I do know is that the channel also aired an obscure cartoon that really pissed off my mother. A year and a half after the beginning, the block was renamed Nick Jr. Classics, but the process remained the same.
You're watching Nick Jr. Classics. Coming up next is Thomas the Tank Engine.
One episode per night, every night. I watched regularly back in the early days. Go figure. After doing a bit of research, Thomas was removed from Classics in 2009 and the block ended in 2010. I remember none of that. Although to be fair, my mind was elsewhere at the time. 4 words, kids.
This is Cartoon Network.
Speaking of which, before we call it a day, there is one more thing to mention with Nick Jr. And it involves this video from Cartoon Network. I know this might seem confusing, but just go with me on this one. It's June 2005 and I had just spent a weekend in Lochgelly, thus recording 8 hours of Cartoon Network. I turn on Nick Jr. just for the hell of it, and this is what I see.
This Sunday, Thomas is having a party. Start the day in celebration with party episodes from all your friends. Then at 12 o'clock, my party starts with Thomas and Friends stories one after the other until 6 p.m. My wife will make the cakes and sandwiches, and I'll be supervising the decorations. All the other engines are coming, and I'd like you to be there too. Join Thomas and Friends for Thomas's party, today at 12 p.m. on Nick Jr.
6 hours of Thomas and Friends? Holy shit. There was just one tiny problem. I only had one recordable tape, and I'd already used it the night before. Well, I'm certainly not going to miss this. I hopped on a train, because shortcut home. As soon as I reached home, straight into the VCR went this video. It wasn't completely to waste, the only public recording of this 6-hour marathon, and I caught 2.5 hours of it. It was 13 years ago, so I can't quite remember the entire marathon, but according to a YouTube comment, it was mostly Season 5 and 6 content. I think we need more than 6 hours to get through every single episode. I mean, if we're talking about just the first 7 seasons, we're looking at least 15 hours, and that's without ad breaks every 20 minutes. Jesus, we've covered a lot here. And a fair bit of it was relating to Cartoon Network. I got an idea.
Coming up next, it's Mouse Mayhem and Cat Cavortings. Tom and Jerry, here on Cartoon Network.
In January 2017, I made a simple statement regarding Ed, Edd n Eddy. You hate the ads? Get the fuck off this channel. I'd like to retract and amend that quote right now. If you don't like Tom and Jerry, get the fuck off this channel. I'll admit the ads are probably not for everyone. Tom and Jerry, on the other hand, is an absolute classic and I will not hear a word against it. As much as I praised Looney Tunes last Christmas, I have to praise Tom and Jerry more. This was one of my childhood cartoons long before the Eds or Billy and Mandy or even Sonic and Pokemon came along. This was one of the first and I loved it. I mean, hell, if my love isn't clear at this point, just look at all these videos I own. And the more I think about it, I may be the only person on this planet who has recorded the Tom and Jerry movie more than once. Very few people actually like the movie, and even then I only re-recorded it because I missed the beginning. Fart jokes. So there's a lot to my collection. Let's have a look at just one. Let's take the first one I ever owned, Bad Day at Cat Rock from 1989. Copyright warnings. Very bland copyright warnings. Oh my god, I get it! It just goes on and on and on and on. I tell you, thank God for the 90s. MGM and the Roaring Lion. It wouldn't be Tom and Jerry without it. And straight to the point. This video carries 8 classic Tom and Jerry cartoons, ranging from 1940 to 1966. Bad Day at Cat Rock, Muscle Beach Tom, Nitwitty Kitty, Putting on the Dog, Springtime for Thomas, The Two Musketeers, Puppy Tail, and Puss Gets the Boot, the first Tom and Jerry cartoon ever made. So if you like messing around on a construction site, breaking plates, dropping bowling balls on heads, impressing women with your muscles, dressing up as a dog, sword fights with food-filled cannons, or even the greatest scream to ever exist in animation form, then this is the video for you. Indeed, even when I was watching the video in preparation for this review, I found myself having a few good laughs, despite having seen every single one of these cartoons at least a trillion times. I'm not sure how Tom and Jerry compares to other cartoons, but I'm willing to bet it fits in my top 10 for cartoons, along with Ed, Edd n Eddy, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Sonic Boom, and something I will be mentioning in June. Shit, if I'm brutally honest, forget top 10, it might even make my top 5, it is that good. Bad Day at Cat Rock may not be the best Tom and Jerry video, but I can definitely see it being my favourite, because of how much it influenced me in the early 90s. You know, thinking back, Tom and Jerry could easily be the first cartoon I ever watched. This was definitely there before we had on digital, which is when Cartoon Network began to take over my life. It was a long and arduous process, but it was all complete by 2005. So if it's not clear at this point, Tom and Jerry was a fun-time favourite. Oh, speaking of which, look what I purchased recently. So while I had Aristocats and Jungle Book and Postman Pat and such, quite often I found myself watching children's preschool compilation released in 1994. This was presented to my cousin and I back in, I want to say 1996, maybe 97, and was the first Thomas video I watched but didn't own myself. I used the term Thomas video loosely. There's only one episode on the video and the rest of it is just a highlights package for various other children's TV shows. If you love Sooty & Co, Tots TV, Rainbow, or Rosie and Jim, this release might appeal to you. I sorta liked Tots TV, but the rest of it, I didn't really care for. Granted, I watched it every now and then, but back then I didn't have much else to offer. It kills time and amuses my primitive brain. Sometimes I watched it through, sometimes I just stopped after Trust Thomas. One episode is just not enough. And you know, I had all these Thomas videos at the time, all of these at home, and it never occurred to me to take a few of them over to Fife to keep me amused. It's not that I wasn't allowed, I just never bothered. For Christ's sake, young me, Postman Pat can only work for so long! A few years later, I received this, Fun Time Favourites. Thank God, more material. What are we dealing with here? 5 episodes, 6 episodes, 12 episodes, hell yeah! 67 minutes, now we're talking. So Funtime Favourites features 12 episodes from seasons 1 through 5, narrated by Ringo Starr and the guy who succeeded him. I will not say the name. The video has a weird shtick, where each episode is dedicated to a particular character. In this case, the 8 main steam engines, Bertie, Trevor and Terence the Tractor. Apparently kids voted for which episodes made it onto the video. We have Thomas Gets Bumped for Thomas, Percy Runs Away for Percy, Edward and Gordon for Gordon, Toby's Discovery for Toby, James and the Express for James, Edward's Exploit for Edward, All at Sea for Harold, Henry and the Elephant for Henry, Bertie's Chase for Bertie, Thomas and Trevor for Trevor, The Runaway for... Who the fuck voted for the Runaway as Duck's episode? He appears for 60 seconds and doesn't have any lines. And Henry's Forest for Terence, really? Now they're just being silly. The other 10 episodes make sense. Percy Runs Away for Percy works, All at Sea is fine for Harold, They probably could have picked something better than Thomas Gets Bumped, but whatever. If you're young and you ignore the gimmick, it's just a standard video release. About as standard as Down the Mine or Chases, Races and Runaways. Like Postman Pat, it kills time and amuses the kids. That's what's important here, and it does the job so much better than this. I'm willing to bet I never watched this one again once Funtime favourites entered the picture. And later when you add in Men in Black 2 and the Back to the Future trilogy and Pingu and Stuart Little and whatever else I had, my Glen Rothis collection is complete. Time flies when you're entertained by garbage like this, I always say. When I'm forced away from home, I need content like this to make time go fast. It's gotta go fast, like Sonic the Hedgehog. So as some of you may know, I am a massive Sonic the Hedgehog fan and have been for the past 22 years. It all started with Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I still remember playing that game at school in the late 90s, and it was great. The video games and the comic series made me a fan of the Blue Rat. But there was a time when I didn't play Sonic much. There was a time when Sonic was very limited in my life. This was between 2000 and 2008. All I had in that time frame was Sonic R, a game that I liked more than I really should have, Sonic 3D Flicky's Island, a game that sucks when you look past the graphics, Sonic Heroes, which looked good but I could never comprehend the gameplay gimmick of swapping between 3 characters. And after 2007, Sonic and the Secret Rings, which I never actually played until about 2 years ago. It's probably the 3rd worst Sonic game I've played behind Sonic Free Riders and Sonic 06. As for the comics, they were discontinued in 2002, so they didn't last that long. Thanks to the internet, I was finally able to actually finish the entire comic series. It took me 10 years to learn that the evil Sonic working for Dr. Robotnik in issue 87 was just a failed clone. You could tell I was truly heartbroken about this. But in those years, there was one thing I had, something that well and truly kept my love for Sonic alive. This video from 1997, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, High Stakes Sonic and Sonic Breakout. Jesus, that title's a mouthful. I'm just going to call it High Stakes Sonic, that's the best episode on the video after all. And when I say best episode on the video, that's really not saying much, as there's only 2 episodes on the entire video, resulting in only 42 minutes of cartoon entertainment. We have High Stakes Sonic, which involves Sonic infiltrating the Casino Night Zone to save a group of sheep from eternal slavery, leading him to make a difficult decision involving Tails. And then there's Sonic Breakout, where a satirical comic book artist is imprisoned by Robotnik, requiring his biggest fan to plan a breakout. He writes funny comics about Robotnik, trusts Sonic to be his biggest fan. This video release is a slightly mixed bag. I thought it was great back in the old days, seeing Sonic speed around with Tails, foiling the schemes of Dr. Ivo Robotnik. These days, however, not so much. Look, I appreciate the video for what it did, it kept my Sonic love alive. But the problem is, the TV series just isn't that good. It really isn't. I tried to watch it a few months back and it has aged horribly. I was on the first episode and I had to turn off after 10 minutes due to boredom. The show may have been great back in 1993, but 25 years later, not so much. I'm going to get some flack from Sonic fans for this, but I'm convinced at this point, so I'm going to say it. Sonic Boom is the best Sonic TV series to ever exist. I'm stating that right here, right now. Adventures of Sonic sucks, I haven't seen Sonic Sad AM, Sonic Underground is sort of just there and isn't super entertaining, and Sonic X is probably the most infamous non-video game production in the entire series. Sonic Boom is great, and I don't care who disagrees. The plots are fresh, the jokes are great, and I love the light-hearted tone of the series.
Ooh, what does that smell?
It's us! We snuck in through a sewer pipe.
Jungle laser, fry you with my laser!
She's not my girlfriend!
Ah, Sonic the Hedgehog! Snooping as usual, I see!
Well, this just went from me talking about a video keeping my Sonic spirit alive straight into me evaluating many related sources of entertainment and why all of them are inferior to something I like. Nothing new here, other than constant complaining and making stale jokes about the latest console game. This is just a standard day for an average Sonic fan. Well, not for me. I actually try to enjoy things in the Sonic series. I don't actually take pleasure out of bashing Rise of Lyric and Sonic Forces. You know, if I really wanted to trigger some Sonic fans, all I'd have to say is Sonic 06 is Sonic Adventure 3. Now on that note, I gotta go get ready for Easter. Bugs Bunny's Easter Funnies, released by Warner Brothers in 1977, but not actually released onto video until 1996. I'm a massive fan of Looney Tunes, and yet it took me 6 years to get this. That makes as much sense as the Easter Bunny laying eggs.
How do you get crucifixion, resurrection, and then chocolate bunnies, colored eggs? How do you do that one? Even kids are going,
rabbits don't lay eggs. What is this?
My thoughts exactly. So let's have a look at this one. And let it be known, I hate having to retrieve videos from the back. I have 2 levels here, top or bottom. It is a pain to retrieve something from the back. I don't care if it's Thomas and Friends, or Singing Kettle, or something Disney related. It is a pain in the almighty ass. Still, it beats storing them in cardboard boxes. So let's check out Easter Funnies for the first time in about a decade. So the Easter Bunny is sick this year. He doesn't look sick at all, he just looks like a lazy asshole. But let's go with it. He phones Granny about finding a replacement. Apparently retirement was just not enough for her. She now works for the Easter Bunny. And of course, she recommends Bugs Bunny because Daffy Duck as an Easter Bunny won't work. He tries several times to prove otherwise to Granny, but the stupid duck can't take a hint. Unfortunately, Bugs is contractually obliged to finish his cartoons before taking another role. Oh great, it's a compilation movie like the rest of them. How long is this? 48 minutes. Super! That's just what we need. A compilation movie that's less than an hour long. Fortunately, Bugs is an upstanding fella, so he offers to introduce Granny to a few of his colleagues, including Pepe Le Pew, Foghorn Leghorn, and Sylvester and Tweety. The same Tweety Granny has owned since 1947, mind you. And of course, Sylvester will be perfect as an Easter Bunny. There's just the minor problem that he's a cat, and every single person in the universe would laugh at him for playing a fucking rabbit. Good lord, this video is stupid. So in this very short quote-unquote movie, we have Nighty Night Bugs, Hillbilly Hare, Bully for Bugs, Tweety's Circus, Birds Anonymous, For Sentimental Reasons, Rabbit of Seville, Little Boy Boo, Robin Hood Daffy, and Sahara Hare. Unlike Christmas Looney Tunes and a number of the movies, these cartoons are not complete. So by the time my 24-year-old self made it to the 3rd cartoon, Bully for Bugs, I started wondering what the point of the video was. Instead of actually coming up with something original, they just piled together a few minutes of several cartoons, and the segments actually relating to Easter are sandwiched in between and usually last 60 seconds at most. Honestly, this could have been about anything. None of the cartoons actually relate to Easter. This could have been about casting for the Headless Horseman in a Halloween movie, and they would not have needed to drop any cartoons. Hell, half the time they don't even have a decent transition. 1 second, Sylvester is talking to Granny about how well he can play the Easter Bunny, and 5 seconds later, without warning, we're watching the cartoon Birds Anonymous. I am officially surprised. I went into this review preparing to talk about how good this video is, like most Looney Tunes releases are. And now I think this is one of the laziest Easter cash-ins I have ever seen, and pretty much the laziest video I own. I've looked over my entire collection and I struggle to think of a video release as feeble as this. For something that has been labelled as an Easter special, I kind of expect a little bit more. Not a single one of these cartoons have the slightest relation to Easter. I mean, you could cut out the clips of Granny and this could have passed as a regular compilation video like the birthday cartoon collection. I'll have to get to that one at some point. Oh, fuck it. Fast forward. So at the end, Bugs tells Granny that his agent has allowed him to play the Easter Bunny if Granny delays Easter for a week. So all he had to do was ask his agent, "Fuck you, Bugs Bunny!" And to add insult to injury, the Easter Bunny appears. He's actually going to do his job. I knew that asshole wasn't sick, so this experience has been an entire waste. Bugs Bunny's Easter Funnies. It was not funny and had very little to do with Easter. I'd never thought I'd say this about a Looney Tunes release, but I feel ripped off. It's a mediocre and boring cash-in that has little to do with the main subject. You know, after this terrible experience, I need something good. I need the best. The very best. So when it comes to Thomas and Friends, my favourite home video is Chases, Races and Runaways from 1997. I couldn't think of a single positive aspect back in episode 7, but I know for sure I enjoyed it over everything else when I was younger. As for my favourite DVD in the series, that honour goes to the very best of Thomas and Friends, the very first DVD I ever bought dating back to August 2003. The first Thomas DVD, that is. My first DVD overall was Toy Story 2. Yay for history! Unfortunately, my DVD is severely damaged, so we're going to have to go without for this one. What we have here is 16 episodes from seasons 1 through 5, narrated by Ringo Starr and Sergeant Martin Donnelly. What we have in this jam-packed collection is Thomas and Gordon, James and the Coaches, Cranky Bugs, Rusty and the Boulder, Dirty Work, Paint Pots of Queens, Buzz Buzz, Thomas and Special Letter, Thomas Person and the Dragon, Trust Thomas, Thomas Comes to Breakfast, No Joke for James, Pop Goes the Diesel, Ghost Train, Percy Runs Away, and Gallant Old Engine. It really is a decent set of episodes. They're all stuck together in a jumbled order, but most of them work. Why they're out of order, I don't know. It can get really weird with Dirty Work coming before Pop Goes the Diesel, but other than that, the episode ordering isn't the worst thing in the world. No, you want to talk about horrible organisation, look at Biggest Party Video Ever. Yeah, I'll have to get to that one day. I'm sure it'll be something else. Now, as I said, when I reviewed Chases, Races and Runaways, I praised the video, calling it the best Thomas and Friends video I have ever owned. And yet, I was able to say very little about what makes it the best. Very Best of Thomas, on the other hand, I know exactly how this one wins over other DVDs. It has the episodes to entertain, sure, but where the DVD has always won in the past 15 years has been in the area of presentation, in this case, the DVD menus. You go into the episode selection and you have 3 pages featuring animated clips from Gordon, Thomas and Percy, alongside preview clips of every episode and short portions of classic episode music from 2 episodes, Thomas and Gordon and James and the Coaches. To most adults, a normal reaction will be, so what, it's just a DVD menu, get over it. But as a 10-year-old who just so happens to be a fan of this children's TV series, it amazes them and will keep them entranced for a long time. If I had to compare it to something non-Thomas related, it would have to be the Toon City period of Cartoon Network. Here in the UK, Toon City was launched in April 2005 and lasted until May 2007. That was 2 full years. Considering how much I watched Cartoon Network in those days, I easily took to the City look. It wasn't just those 2 hours of cartoons every night. The entire day's programming kept me entertained. Let's put it this way, my daily TV schedule revolves around Cartoon Network and occasional half-hour switches to Cartoon Network 2, Boomerang, Toon Disney and later Disney Cinemagic, the successor to Toon Disney. When you take the various eras of Cartoon Network, in this case the 3 eras between 2002 and 2009, and you compare the presentation style of them, Toon City wins over all others. Era 1, Casillas, was simply a series of boxes, each containing a certain cartoon that leads into the next box, essentially setting up a domino effect. As for the era preceding Toon City, whatever that era was called, the presentation and animation feels really bland to look at compared to an entire city housing hundreds of cartoon characters, many of whom you'd never expect to interact in a million years. When and where else would you see Mandy call Professor Utonium a dipshit for thinking he had locked himself out of his car? These days, in the ever-evolving world of home entertainment, presentation is super important. Take this DVD of A Million Ways to Die in the West. I absolutely despise title menus like this. A still background image with vague icons being used to illustrate play, movie and scene selection. They're becoming more and more common every day. I just fucking love them. Just the most boring and lazy designed menus I have ever seen. You compare that to the very best of Thomas and you immediately notice how appealing the DVD design is. It's all in the presentation. If you want to sell something, it not only has to entertain, but also has to look nice. You know, this video isn't as much about the very best of Thomas as it is the importance of presentation in home media. It's something that is incredibly easy to talk about. Next time we talk about something that may not be incredibly easy to talk about.